Hey everybody, we're already back with another video. Duane's information got released on warofthevisionscalc.com, so we're going to talk all about him and the new vision card, since we actually have all of these stats and specific details on both of those things. So now we can get this video out before you actually get the chance to pull on his banner, and hopefully I can inform some people. Of all the times I've thanked War of the Visions Calc, this is the biggest one because I thought I was going to have to wait till tomorrow to make this video, and instead I'm making it ahead of time, and I'm so grateful to all the hard work that Bismarck and everybody's doing on that website. So thank you guys so much. Let's get into Duane. Let's really get to know Duane. Alright, so he is 100 cost, unit 3 move, 1 jump. Dark Knight of Remorse is his main job. He gets Viking and Dragoon subs, and then otherwise, everything's as expected. His stats are good. He has good HP, he has good AP, he has good attack, magic doesn't matter. He has some crit rate. Dexterity is fine, luck is fine, agility is high for a tank, low for an attacker, and then you get some defense. His master ability gives dark HP up to dark units and dark attack up for dark units. He gets 10% attack himself, and he gets another 20% defense piercing or penetration, and then he gets 20% more attack from his board. So that's really big so far. Like, he's got higher attack than a lot of attackers that we have in the game. Just looking at his board stats, just looking at his base stats, we're not looking at passes or anything, but this is already a really good sign for his stats. And the fact that he gets 30% more from his the board node and from the master ability, and that he has that built-in defense penetration, again, very, very good sign so far. But he still gets that huge amount of HP, he still gets the defense, and then we'll see what else he gets. So for his resistances, it's your typical weak to light. Then he gets some resistance to confusion, stop, and disable. And then he is resistant to slash and pierce and magic. He also is weak to punch, and I'm loving this, right? So Cecil, light unit, has monk sub job. He's just going to be thwacking this guy. It's going to be great. And then he's a little bit weak to projectile, but we know he's got Viking sub, which means he can correct for that if he wants. So all around, good resistances. Nothing truly spectacular except for that pierce resistance is very intriguing. As for his TMR, it's called the Helm of Remorse, and I bet it's going to look really cool. I don't have a photo of it yet, but it has 386 HP, which is great, and then it has defense and spirit. So this is going to be really nice to give spirit to him if you go with a defense armor, or if you go with the spirit armor, then you're going to get a little bit of defense as well. And then taking a look at the ability, it gives him an active ability. You can use this ability to increase his magic resist by 25% for 3 turns. It's a 20 TP skill, 1 cast only. That's huge, right? So you use that, and all of a sudden he becomes a magic tank, and it's pretty reasonable for him to use that at the beginning of the fight. Although it is going to clash with his team buff, so we'll talk all about that later. Okay, passives. So everything's as expected, except we have one that we didn't see yesterday, which is Knighthood, and it gives him 15 defense. So that's obviously very important for him if he's going to tank. And then otherwise, he gets that increased chance of the being targeted, the self-hate. It's 5, same as Valve Love. So that's about 3 attacks, and then he's going to be hate-free at that point. He also gets 1 more move, which is always very, very important for tanks to kind of get moving, get out in front of everybody else, so they take the first hit so no one gets hit in the crossfire. And then the other big one would be the Unyielding Protection for missile resistance, and maybe the jump one if he really needs it. For counters, we finally found out what his counter is. It's sorcery counter, so he can counter magic damage with the powerful attack, and it's got some AoE on that counter, but I think if you're gonna, that's gonna be his bruiser counter. If he's a tank, he might use Dragon's Blade. Personally, I think that's the way to go to heal yourself a little bit. When you want him to be a tank, you want him to be a tank, not a damage dealer. Now, he's going to deal damage because he has great stats, but I strongly believe in that when you're like using someone in a role, that's what they're, that's what you focus on. You don't try to add extra stuff on. That's where you start compromising, and then you start losing the maximum potential of a unit. So if you truly want to use him as your tank, then I think you'd probably use Dragon's Blade counter, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. So there's Vow of Love, which is something I have to talk about. I forgot I put that slide in there. So he doesn't get an active provoke in his skill set. He doesn't get a taunting blade, which means once he gets attacked 3 times and he loses hate, he will not be a tank anymore. So you might want to stack Vow of Love there, and that's going to be really, really important when we talk about his vision card, because he won't be able to equip it. Okay, main skills here. It's everything that we saw in the release video, except we also have Dark Mantle, which is this tanking buff. He gets 15 defense and spirit, but for 3 turns, which is really good, and then he decreases his light resistance. Now, if you watched my video on Titus, I said, well, there's not that many light DPS units, and that's true, and a lot of them are limited, so we're not really actually that worried about light units yet. Later on, this will become a big deal. And then otherwise, everything's the same as I said in my other video. These are all really good skills. You have to think about Atonement though. That's his big slash attack buff and his defense penetration buff. That's going to be something that you might have to cut if you want him to tank, because here's my idea. If he's tanking for you, one, you want him to get ahead. So if he stays behind to buff his allies, then you're all going to be stuck together. 2, he only has so many turns that he can buff before he gets into range and starts attacking instead of buffing. So at that point, you know, you want him to use Dark Mantle, you want him to use his TMR potentially. If he uses Atonement first and the priority for the AI is to use that team buff first, then he might not use his tanking skills, he might not be fully ready to be a tank. So again, this is where you have to make that decision. Am I going to compromise on his tanking ability to give everybody a slash attack buff? Or is Atonement only for when I'm using him as an attacker and when I'm not using him as a tank? The sub skills is disappointing. It's literally those 2 skills we talked about. Both are going to be really interesting skills in PvE, and we're not sure how they're going to work in PvP yet because we don't know whether or not he'll use these. You look at the AP costs and you think, okay, well, Rising Twilight he'll use for sure because it's a low AP and it's something that he'll use when he runs out of AP and attacks once. And then otherwise, you know, Magic Infuse has long range and its AP cost is only 4 higher than Sword Eater and Spell Eater, so he's likely going to use that instead of those skills because it's more powerful as well. And it has way better, like it's going to reduce AP on people, it's going to be taking off the auto life off of people, so I think he's going to use Magic Infuse and Darkness a lot more than he's going to use Sword Eater and Spell Eater, which means, well, we might use his sub jobs instead. So talking about those sub jobs, we got Viking, and he gets a really cool skill here that I wasn't predicting. So everything's the same except for Killing Axe, and that gives him Human Killer, which is an amazing PvP ability to have, and it's an AoE, it's a strong skill. And I actually see people using Viking sub for sure, because you also get a defense buff, you get an attack buff, and then everything is good. Launch is fine as well. I feel like that's a good cost to damage ratio there. Dragoon is, we don't get vertical jump, but we do get horizontal and regular jump and different damage type. That's great. Really super high range on the horizontal jump. Also great. A couple of good buffs. Dragon's Roar, Dragon's Standard, he won't ever use those on auto, but in live PvP, Dragon's Standard is really cool. This can help him be that unit that closes people down. So I really do love that he has that on his sub, so that's great. On to his Limit Burst. It is a 58 AP attack. It's fine for strength, but it's going to heal himself based off the damage he does, and the range is really good. It can hit multiple people, so this could totally be a full heal. Now looking at his agility, again, it's good for a tank, it's bad for a DPS. Because it's still slow, there's a good chance he could go up, you know, maybe he used bells, takes a bunch of damage, and then he has the AP to use this, he pops it off and heals himself back up again, and he's still tanking. That could be a really cool application for this LB, but then otherwise, you know, it's not an incredible LB. We have a ton of comparisons to do today because we have to do the tank comparisons and then we have to do the DPS comparisons. So let's start with the tanks. Here is Engelbert and here is Wall. You can see HP, very high, agility, much higher on Duane than Engelbert and Wall, and then the defense, obviously Engelbert's never going to really be beat in that category, but resistances, Again, you know, Duane's a little bit lower than these other guys, but he gets the agility, he gets the attack, he gets some more important stats, he gets more dexterity, and his luck, well, I mean, it's a little bit lower, but overall, Duane is definitely looking like a really good hybrid unit in terms of like having enough of a tank stat and the resistances, but then still having all the attack. So clearly he's not like a true tank, and I always use these guys as a comparison for tanks because I view these Engelbert and Wall as like the most durable tank. They're the toughest tanks. They're like the true definition of a tank. So then when you compare anybody else to them, you're comparing them to the top of that scale of being super tanky, and then we find out where they sit along there. But I know, as someone said in my guild, we also have to compare to other tanks like Agrius, and Agrius is similar in a lot of ways, you know, a very, very tanky unit that can attack, but Duane is definitely going to be much stronger than Agrius in a lot of ways. Agrius is going to have her status effects, she's going to have her amazing team buffs and self buffs, and she's going to have hate generation and the paladin sub job, but Duane's going to have her beat in a lot of ways, including resistances, and when you count his TMR buff, Duane can really do a lot of great stuff tanking wise, but Agrius gets the whole tank kit, and that's the main difference between them. So then we have to make those DPS comparisons as well. So I've got Ruinstern, and taking a look, you can see where the difference is in terms of you know, that luck and that agility and those kind of stats. But then otherwise, I mean, Duane's got more strength, or sorry, more attack, that's from an old template, than Ruinstern does. And I have to give you a disclaimer, these are your base stats, these are your board stats. It doesn't include passives. So the biggest thing to think about here is all the comparisons I'm going to make. You know, all these units, they get some form of the skill self-sacrifice. Duane does not get that. He gets the Viking skill to increase his attack. Everybody else is getting self-sacrifice plus usually something else as well. So that's definitely something that we have to consider when we're saying, okay, Duane has really high attack. So similarly, I could compare him to Kane and Laswell and say, wow, look at Duane, he's got higher attack than Kane and Laswell do, but Kane has a really good self-sacrifice, and Laswell has two different attack up passives. So in the end, Kane and Laswell, they're going to get more attack than Duane does, but Duane is still really strong. So that's kind of where I want to sit on it, is that he's really, really strong. He's not going to be as strong as the self-sacrifice units necessarily, but he gets so many things in this package. It's really super interesting. Okay, next we're going to talk about Irresistible Darkness, which is the exclusive VC that will go with Duane, but it's pretty good altogether. So stats, it only gives attack and HP. Then you can get 10/attack on the bestowed. And then you can get 12% magic resistance and 35% increase in attack. So both really desirable skills for their party ability. Furthermore, if you give this to Duane, he can get 20 dark attack. So people in my comments were saying this is the best in slot for Duane, and I was like, well, hold up. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. You know, he's a tank, he might not need this, whatever it is, but I didn't expect it to have 20 dark attacks, so I take back my comments. This is the best card for him, for sure. I don't think it's mandatory to get this for him if you're really strapped for Visior, but you can only make him better with this. Now here's the thing, you can't use this and Valve Love at the same time. You can't use this and Leona's Castle to give him more spirit and what's the other stat called? Oh, defense. So that's where it's going to be like, well, what do you intend to use him as the tank or as the DPS? This is obviously the card for him to use as the DPS. So comparing it to other cards, we've got Fenrir, which will give you way more magic resistance and a bunch of other stats, but then you're going to lose that attack up, you're going to lose that personal slash up. So this is for your more tanky party, your more magic targeted party. And then Ifrit is the same thing in that, you know, well, great, we can get 50% attack up from Ifrit, we can get fire attack up, which is a much more specific ability, harder to fit into your team. So really, when you compare something like Ifrit to the Duane card here, Irresistible Darkness. I actually like the Irresistible Darkness way more than Ifrit because you get a way more relevant bestowed ability. You get a little less attack, but you get magic resist. Altogether, I think that this is a better card than Ifrit is. But in terms of comparing it to Fenrir, that one's kind of tougher. So they're just meant for different things. What it comes down to though is that this is a card that you can pull without Duane. So it has strong and relevant effects. It's a good card without Duane. It's a very good card with Duane. And the hybrid use of being able to supply defense and offense with one card, it can fill 2 different vision card slots with 1 slot. That's very appealing to me. The cons is that it clashes with Ifrit and Fenrir, so if you use those cards regularly, then this card can't be used with them. And then it doesn't have a magic stat, so you couldn't, for instance, use this with Howlet in order to give him some slash attack up for your party, because he would just lose out on not having any magic from there. Now moving on to pros and cons for Duane. Well, pros, it's very similar to yesterday. You know, damage dealer tank hybrid is very, very cool. Passive hate is super strong, even if you don't plan to use him as a tank. He's a bruiser, so you could just leave that passive hate on to get the move +1 and then mess with your opponent's movements and targeting, and then when he loses his hate, you don't care because he was just there for the beginning. He wasn't there to be the tank for the entire match. He gets multiple attack types, the debuffs, the Dark Imperil, attack and magic down. It's all good for PvE, it's good for PvP. The slash attack buff for allies, the 40% defense penetration that he's going to be able to get, it's all really solid. The cons, again, 100 cost unit, limited, short range, no active hate generation, and then I said last time our last 100 cost unit was a Dark Slasher, Super Stern, and I said that was a con. And someone said, well, no, that's actually a pro because you can use them together, and that's totally correct. He does work well with Stern. His master ability, his slash attack buff, those are all great with Stern. It was more that like we've gotten 2 double cost units in a row. They both fill the Dark Slasher role. You're less likely to go for it, I think, if you already have one and you've gone through that experience. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a bummer to get another 100 cost unit that is a Dark Slasher. Like they could have gone even like a Dark Mage would have been more different, but it is kind of disappointing that way. So then the question is, should you pull? And the answer is no, don't pull on the 100 cost limited unit. It's just crazy. Now, if there's some sort of guaranteed banner, step up, whatever, then yeah, you could pull for him if you have the Vizier to follow up and max him. But just keep in mind that this card is really going to be amazing for him. And now I am on the side of yes, you'd want to go for the card as well. And that's quite the investment. It really is a kick in the gut, like to have to do both of these things. Like that's really just insane to me. I think he's actually fine with the card or without the card. But the card exists, so you have to get it. But if the card didn't exist, I wouldn't be complaining either. I wouldn't say, oh, he really needs an exclusive card. We could just use Diabolos. We could use tanking cards, whatever it is. But because the card exists, you have to get it. So that I thought that was a kind of like, you know, they went one step too far, and it's a bummer. But overall, if the rates are down, if it's you know, the double cost shards, everything is regular for a 100 cost unit, then no, don't pull for Duane. I'm sorry, he's good. He's a good unit. His stats are really good. He's in a hybrid unit. He can do 2 things, but it doesn't matter. It's just not worth the investment in my eyes, because he's limited, because you can't slow build him. Now for Irresistible Darkness, if you get Duane, you should get this card. And then otherwise, it's up to you. If you think, if you don't use Ifrit or Fenrir, or you don't have either of those, then this could be an easy get because they'll probably do a 10k step up banner where you get it guaranteed. And in which case, then yeah, it's probably good to get. But remember, as the wise King Elda said, make your own assessment and then make your decision. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.